"Who unplugged my daughter's microphone?" Ethan Walker's voice was low, but it cut through the backstage noise like a blade through cloth. Lily stood under the warm stage lights, 9 years old, eyes red, both hands wrapped around her music folder as the black microphone in front of her sat dead. Ethan dropped to one knee at the stage edge, his faded blue shirt brushing the dusty floor, and pushed the loose XLR cable back into its box until the green signal light blinked. Principal Daniel Brooks stepped closer, smiling too calmly. "This is a technical adjustment, Mr. Walker," Lily whispered. "Daddy, they already called someone else." 3 hours earlier, Briar Glen Elementary smelled like floor wax, paper programs, and too much perfume from parents dressed for the annual fundraising show. The auditorium had been polished until the old wooden aisles reflected the lights above, and every folding chair wore a little white donation envelope taped to the back. Ethan moved quietly along the side wall with his tool bag against his hip, checking cables the way other men checked locks before bedtime. He was not on the program. He was not on the donor board. He was the sound technician hired for one long evening, the single dad with calloused hands, tired eyes, and a daughter who had practiced one song every night in their small kitchen until the neighbors knew the chorus by heart. Lily sat in the third row with her knees together, wearing the pale blue dress her mother used to love, a dress Ethan had ironed twice because the first crease would not come out. She kept opening and closing her music folder, not from pride, but from nerves. On the first page, in careful pencil, she had written "Let My Daughter Sing," because she thought it sounded like something brave from an old movie. Ethan had smiled when he saw it, then looked away before she noticed the pain in his face. Near the stage, Principal Brooks floated from parent to parent with a practiced kindness, shaking hands, thanking donors, calling every decision for the children. Beside him stood Valerie Crane, elegant in a cream coat, her diamond bracelet catching the light each time she touched the shoulder of her own daughter, Madison, who had already been given a solo in the second act. No one said the word money. They didn't have to. It was printed on banners, whispered in reserved seats, and folded into every smile that lasted a little too long. At 6:35, while Ethan was adjusting the left monitor, he heard something that did not belong. The soft click of the auditorium side door behind the sound table. Not loud, not suspicious enough for anyone else. Just a click, followed by a quick shuffle near the cable box, and the faint smell of expensive floral perfume where only stage crew usually stood. Ethan looked up, but all he saw was the back of the program manager disappearing behind the curtain with a clipboard pressed to her chest. A small security camera above the hallway door blinked red, steady and silent. Ethan returned to work. He had trained himself not to assume the worst about people. That was part of his dignity, and sometimes part of his wound. Then, 10 minutes before curtain, a fresh stack of programs appeared on the check-in table. Ethan noticed because Lily's name had been on the old list between the fourth-grade choir and the violin trio. On the new list, her line was gone. In its place was Madison Crane Special Donor Tribute Solo. Lily saw it before Ethan could hide it. Her small mouth opened, but no sound came out. He knelt in front of her, blocking the view of the parents passing behind them. "Look at me, sweetheart." She did. Barely. "Did I do something wrong?" "No," he said, and there was no shake in it. "You did the work." Across the room, Margaret Hayes, the old music teacher with silver hair and a black cardigan, watched from beside the piano. She did not move yet. She only stared at the changed program, then at Lily's trembling hands, then at Ethan's face as he stood without anger. That was what made her pause. Not his poverty, not his pain, his restraint. When Ethan walked to Principal Brooks and quietly asked why his daughter had been removed, Brooks kept his smile in place, even as his eyes hardened. "We had to make a last-minute adjustment for quality and timing." Was Lily told? "Mr. Walker, this is a school event, not a private recital." Ethan nodded once, as if swallowing a stone. "Then please give me the reason in writing." Brooks blinked. Just once. That was the first crack. The house lights dimmed. The audience clapped. Lily was guided toward the wing, then stopped, then moved aside as Madison Crane was brought forward. And when Lily reached one hand toward the microphone that had been hers during rehearsal, the green light on its channel went dark. Ethan saw the cable hanging loose from the box, cleanly pulled, not fallen. He knelt before anyone could stop him. He did not shout. He did not accuse. He only reconnected what someone had taken apart. Behind him, the auditorium kept breathing, unaware that the smallest piece of evidence in the room was not the cable in his hand, but the red blinking camera above the hallway door. The red camera light above the hallway door kept blinking while Principal Daniel Brooks turned Ethan away from the cable box, as if he were blocking a fire exit instead of kneeling beside his own daughter's dead microphone. "Step back, Mr. Walker. I'm just checking the line." "You've checked enough." The words were quiet, almost polite, but the space around them tightened. Lily stood half-hidden behind the curtain, her music folder pressed flat against her chest, while the green signal light on her channel flickered once and died again under the shadow of Brooks's polished shoes. Ethan slowly removed his hand from the XLR cable. He did not yank it. He did not point. He only looked at the loose end, then at the other 3 microphones glowing steadily across the stage. Behind him, the audience clapped for a group of second graders in paper star crowns, their voices small and bright beneath the warm wash of stage lights. The smell of floor wax and overheated equipment hung in the wings. A program volunteer whispered near the folding table, "Isn't he the sound guy?" Another voice answered lower, "He's the dad, the one making trouble." Ethan heard both. He pretended not to. That was a skill he had learned the hard way, not because words didn't cut, but because Lily was close enough to watch how a man bled. Brooks lifted his radio and spoke into it without taking his eyes off Ethan. "We need backstage access cleared. Keep the show moving." "My daughter's name was on the list," Ethan said. Brooks smiled, but it was the kind of smile built for board meetings, not children. "We had a programming adjustment." "When?" "Tonight." "By whom?" Brooks paused. 2 seconds, maybe 3. Across the wing, Valerie Crane touched the pearl button of her cream coat and leaned toward another parent with the careful sadness of someone performing kindness. "It's unfortunate," she said softly, loud enough to travel. "But these events are very hard on children who aren't prepared." Lily looked down at her shoes. The black Mary Janes Ethan had polished that morning reflected a thin line of stage light, and for a moment his whole world narrowed to that tiny shine and the way his daughter tried to disappear inside it. He stepped closer to her, not to the adults. He bent, took the crumpled corner of her music folder between 2 fingers, and smoothed it flat against his palm. "You are prepared," he whispered. "You hear me?" Lily nodded, but her chin trembled. "Did they hear me practice?" Ethan swallowed. "I did." Margaret Hayes stood by the old upright piano with one hand resting on its scarred lid. She had not spoken since the list changed, but her eyes moved from Lily's folder to the new stack of programs on the check-in table. The fresh pages were too white under the lobby lights, still curled from the printer's heat. On the top copy, Madison Crane's name had been inserted in dark ink where Lily Walker had stood that afternoon. Margaret's fingers tightened slightly on the piano wood. Not belief. Not yet. Just a pause. Brooks turned back toward Ethan with a clipboard pressed to his ribs. "Mr. Walker, you were contracted to manage sound, not challenge artistic decisions. Then put the decision in the event report." "That won't be necessary. It is if my child was removed after the program was locked." A thin quiet opened between them, not loud enough for the audience to notice, but enough for the program manager near the curtain to stop moving. She was a woman with neat hair, a headset, and a smile that appeared only when donors came close. Her thumb slid over the edge of her clipboard, hiding the bottom corner of the revised list. Ethan saw the motion. Margaret saw Ethan see it. Brooks lowered his voice. "You need to be careful. This is a school function." Ethan nodded once. "That's why I'm being careful." No one had an answer for that, so the adults did what adults sometimes do when truth becomes inconvenient. They turned to procedure. A staff member with a lanyard asked Ethan to stand beyond the taped line. Another volunteer moved Lily's chair away from the performer row and placed it near a stack of unused music stands. Valerie Crane offered a sympathetic glance that never reached her eyes. "Maybe next year, sweetheart," she said. Lily did not answer. She only sat where she was told, small hands folded over the folder marked in pencil with the brave words she no longer believed she owned. Ethan stood beside her, tool bag still hanging from his shoulder. His sleeves rolled, grease-darkened nails visible under the clean auditorium lights. A man in a navy blazer glanced at his hands, then at the donor table, and looked away as if workmanship were something embarrassing when placed too close to money. The humiliation was not shouted. It was arranged. One chair moved to the side. One name erased from a page. One father treated like equipment that had made too much noise. Brooks opened the event binder and slid the revised program into the front pocket. For half a second, before the plastic cover closed, Ethan saw the timestamp at the bottom of the page, 6:41 p.m. The original program had been printed before rehearsal ended at 5:15. Margaret stepped away from the piano, her eyes narrowing not at Ethan, but at the ink. Brooks snapped the binder shut, and in that small, clean sound, Ethan realized the microphone had not been the first thing unplugged that night. The microphone had not been the first thing unplugged that night, and Ethan knew it the moment the binder snapped shut. Still, when the first sharp squeal ripped through the auditorium speakers, he moved before pride could stop him. The sound cut across the second-grade chorus like a frightened bird hitting glass. Children on stage clapped their hands over their ears. Parents winced. Principal Brooks turned toward the sound table with panic hidden under a professional smile. Ethan looked at Lily. She was sitting beside the unused music stands now, smaller than she should have looked, her folder resting on her knees like something fragile. "Stay here, sweetheart." "Are we leaving?" "Not yet." He walked to the rear control station, past the taped line, past the volunteer who had just treated him like a problem. Nobody thanked him. Nobody asked him to help. But the children on stage were scared, and that was enough. Ethan set his tool bag gently under the table and placed 2 fingers on the auxiliary fader. The old board was warm from use, smelling faintly of dust and hot plastic. A cheap cable had been looped too close to the monitor feed, and the high frequency was feeding back every time the little singers stepped forward. He lowered the gain, rolled off the treble, and shifted the monitor angle with a quiet turn of his wrist. The scream died into a soft hum, then disappeared completely. On stage, the children lowered their hands one by one. Their teacher mouthed thank you without understanding who had saved them. Brooks saw him at the station and frowned as though Ethan's competence had inconvenienced him. "Mr. Walker, I thought we were clear." Ethan did not look up from the board. "The kids were hurting. That wasn't your call. It was a sound problem. You need permission." Ethan finally raised his eyes. "Not to stop pain." The words were not loud. They barely carried past the last row. But Margaret Hayes, standing near the piano, heard them. She also saw what Ethan did next. He did not use the moment to demand Lily's place back. He did not embarrass Brooks while the audience watched. He simply wrote the time on the corner of his own service sheet. 6:53 p.m., monitor feedback corrected, then slid the paper into the side pocket of his tool bag with the same care a man might use folding a flag. Valerie Crane leaned toward Brooks near the donor row, her voice smooth as polished glass. "This is exactly why events need structure." Brooks nodded, grateful for the sentence because it made control sound like virtue. Ethan heard that too. His hand paused for half a breath on the zipper of the tool bag, then moved on. In his front pocket, his phone buzzed with a rent reminder he did not open. The first of the month was coming. The van needed brakes. Lily's shoes were already tight at the toes. And still, standing in that bright auditorium where donors' names were printed larger than the children's, Ethan chose not to make his pain useful as a weapon. He returned to Lily and crouched so his eyes were level with hers. "They sounded better," she whispered, glancing toward the stage. "Because they were brave enough to keep singing," he said. "Like you." He smiled, but it broke a little at the edge. "Like you." She looked down at her folder. The pencil words on the cover had smudged under her thumb. "Let my daughter sing." Ethan took out a folded napkin from his pocket and dabbed gently at the smudge, careful not to erase the letters. It was such a small thing, almost foolish under the weight of the night, but Lily watched him as if he were repairing more than paper. Across the room, Margaret's gaze shifted from the service sheet sticking slightly out of Ethan's tool bag to the revised program in Brooks's binder. 2 times now. 2 small records. One said Lily had been removed after the program was locked. One said Ethan had saved the sound after being blamed for it. Margaret did not yet know what they meant together, but she knew records had a strange way of remembering what people hoped would pass. Then a soft voice came from Lily, almost hidden beneath the next round of applause. "Daddy, if I don't get to sing tonight, can we still listen to Mom's box when we get home?" Ethan's fingers stilled on the folder. Margaret's hand tightened on the piano lid, because from where she stood, she could see the title of Lily's sheet music, and the song that child carried was not supposed to be in the school anymore. Margaret heard Lily say Mom's box, and the word stayed in the air longer than the applause. At the same time, Principal Brooks began building a cleaner story. He told a volunteer that Ethan had crossed into restricted space, adjusted equipment without authorization, and created confusion during a live event. It sounded reasonable when spoken softly beside a clipboard. It sounded like order. But Margaret had spent 40 years teaching children that music was where tiny wrong notes told the truth, and something in this night was off-key. Ethan did not defend himself. He stood behind Lily's chair with one hand resting lightly on the back of it, not touching her shoulder until she reached up and found his fingers. The next act began. A tap routine under blue stage lights, and every heel strike clicked against the floor like a clock counting down. Brooks approached with the program manager at his side. "Mr. Walker, we'll need your service sheet for the event file." Ethan looked at him. "Which sheet?" "The one you were writing on." "For the sound correction?" "For the incident." The word incident landed hard enough for Lily to look up. Ethan's face did not change. He reached into his tool bag, took out the service sheet, and held it under the small work lamp clipped to the sound table. The paper showed his handwriting in short, practical lines. 6:53 p.m. Monitor feedback corrected. Left AUX gain reduced. No disruption to main program. Brooks reached for it, but Ethan did not let go immediately. "If this is for the incident," he said, "why does it start after my daughter was removed?" A small stillness moved through the corner of the auditorium. Brooks smiled again. "You're mixing separate issues. Then there should be separate records. We don't need to complicate this. A child was cut. A microphone was unplugged. A sound problem was fixed. Those are 3 different things." Margaret looked down at the revised program still tucked under Brooks's arm. The bottom edge showed the 6:41 timestamp, black ink against white paper. Ethan saw it too. He did not reach for it. He only said, "May I see the earlier program?" The program manager answered too quickly. "There wasn't one." Lily blinked. Her voice was small, not brave, just honest. "I had one in my folder before dinner." The program manager's hand tightened around her clipboard. Brooks turned his head just slightly, the way adults do when a child has said something inconvenient but cannot be scolded for telling the truth. Valerie Crane, from the front row, looked back with a sympathetic tilt of her mouth. "Children misremember when they're disappointed," she murmured. Margaret finally moved. Not forward, not publicly. Just one step toward the check-in table where discarded papers had been pushed beneath a stack of donation envelopes. Under the table's white cloth, near a roll of blue painter's tape, she saw the corner of an older program, creased and half-hidden. She did not pick it up yet. Her eyes went instead to Lily's music folder. The penciled title on the sheet inside had troubled her since she first saw it. Not because the song was famous, because it wasn't. It had been removed from Briar Glen's spring catalog decades ago, after a night no one on staff liked to discuss. Margaret looked at Lily gently. "Sweetheart, who taught you that song?" Lily hesitated and looked to Ethan. He nodded once. "Mom did," Lily said. "Not in person. From the little recorder box. Daddy keeps it in the hall closet because it makes him sad." The tap music on stage ended in a bright flourish, but Margaret seemed not to hear the applause. "Do you remember any of it?" Lily's cheeks colored. "Only the chorus." Brooks exhaled with practiced patience. "Mrs. Hayes, this really isn't the time." "Of course," Margaret said, and her voice gave nothing away. "I'm only asking as her music teacher." She was not Lily's music teacher anymore. Everyone knew that, but no one corrected her fast enough. Lily sang under her breath, barely louder than the hum of the projector. 3 notes, a breath, then a soft rising phrase that bent at the end like someone trying not to cry. Margaret's hand found the edge of the piano lid and held it. Ethan saw her knuckles pale. Brooks saw it too, and stepped in front of the music folder as if blocking a draft. "That's enough," he said gently. Too gently. Ethan looked at the folder, then at Brooks, then at the hallway camera beyond the side door. He had no proof yet. Only a revised program, a dead microphone, a service sheet someone wanted renamed, and now an old song that made a retired teacher go still. Then Lily reached into her folder and pulled out a small paper label that had peeled off the recorder box at home, stuck there by accident between the pages. In faded blue ink, Claire's handwriting read, "Auditorium night, don't erase." Margaret looked at those 4 words, and the whole noisy fundraiser seemed to fall a few inches away from her. The words on the peeling label were so small they should not have changed the room, but they did. "Auditorium night, don't erase." Margaret Hayes did not touch the paper at first. She only looked at it as if it were a photograph of someone she had failed to protect. Principal Brooks cleared his throat, softly enough to keep his dignity. "This is very touching, but we cannot let old family recordings disrupt a school fundraiser." Ethan folded the label back into Lily's music folder with 2 careful fingers. "Then don't call it evidence," he said. "Call it a sound check." Brooks gave him a patient smile. "Your daughter has already been removed from the program." "I heard that." "Then you understand." "I understand she was removed before anyone heard her." The sentence settled harder than Ethan intended. Parent near the aisle stopped whispering. Valerie Crane's bracelet clicked against the wooden armrest as she shifted in her reserved seat. The tap dancers hurried past in glittery shoes, laughing because they were children and did not yet know how adults could make cruelty look like paperwork. Margaret stepped beside the piano, her voice low. "Daniel, 1 minute in a closed sound check won't harm the program." Brooks looked at her, then at the donor row, then back at Ethan. 1 minute. Not a performance. Not a promise. A technical evaluation. Ethan nodded. He did not smile. He did not act grateful for being handed the smallest piece of what had already belonged to his child. He simply knelt in front of Lily and straightened the wrinkled edge of her sheet music. "You don't have to prove anything to them," he whispered. Lily looked at the microphone across the stage, its cable now looped and taped where Ethan had repaired it. "Then why am I singing?" His answer came after 1 breath. "So they can't say they never heard you." Margaret heard that too. She turned away, before anyone could see her face. The auditorium emptied into a low intermission murmur while a few committee members lingered near the stage. Ethan moved to the sound table and set the microphone flat. "No reverb. No pitch correction. No sweetening." Just a clean signal, the kind that told the truth whether the truth was pretty or not. His hands worked with quiet familiarity, thumb on the gain knob, forefinger resting near the mute button, eyes on the level meter. The board smelled of warm plastic and dust. The little green bars rose and fell as he tapped the grill once. "Say your name, sweetheart." Lily swallowed. "Lily Walker." The sound came out thin at first, then steadier. Brooks stood with his arms folded, still wearing that polished expression that said this was an inconvenience being generously tolerated. The program manager hovered behind him, one hand close to her clipboard. "Begin when ready," Brooks said. Lily gripped the folder. Her first note trembled. Her second found the room. By the fourth, the humming air conditioner above the back row seemed louder because no one else was moving. She was not perfect. A child's voice never carries the weight of training the way adults pretend it should. But there was something in the breath before the chorus. A tiny catch, then a lift like a hand reaching through fog. Margaret slowly sat down on the piano bench. The program manager's clipboard lowered a full inch. Ethan watched the level meter, not the faces. He would not use his daughter's fear as a weapon. He let the microphone do only what it was built to do: carry an honest sound across a room that had tried not to hear it. When the minute ended, Lily stopped by herself and looked straight at her father, not at the adults. "Was that okay?" Ethan took off the headphones. "That was yours." Brooks drew in a breath, already preparing a soft dismissal. "She has a sweet voice, but the program is full, and we shouldn't let emotion confuse procedure." Margaret's hand landed on the piano lid with a quiet thud. Not angry, decided. "I need the original recording." Brooks turned. "Margaret." "The family box," she said. "And the soundcheck file." The program manager spoke too fast. "We don't keep test files. They can be deleted." Ethan looked up then, calmly. "Not yet." He pointed to the small service USB beside the board, its blue light blinking. "Standard backup. Every live test saves for troubleshooting until the event closes." For the first time that night, Brooks's smile did not return quickly. The room did not gasp. It simply thinned into silence. Like every adult there had heard a lock click somewhere behind the wall. Margaret stepped closer to the sound table and saw the waveform on Ethan's laptop. Lily's small voice rising in clean lines. Then Ethan opened the rough audio from Claire's old recorder box, damaged and hissing, and the chorus appeared beneath the static with the same breath mark, the same lift, the same ache. Proved nothing final. Not yet, but it proved enough that the story they had been told was incomplete. And when Margaret went to the archive cabinet behind the music room 10 minutes later, the file marked Claire Walker was there, but the page where her award record should have been had been cut out with a blade. The page where Claire Walker's award record should have been had not torn by accident. Ethan knew that before anyone said it, because paper remembers violence differently than age. The edges were too clean, the corners too sharp, the cut line running straight through the archive binder like someone had taken a blade to one life and hoped the rest of the book would stay quiet. Margaret Hayes stood beside the open cabinet in the music room, one hand over her mouth, the other resting on the file tab marked Walker. Claire. Spring Arts 2001. The fluorescent light above them hummed weakly. Outside the closed door, the fundraiser continued with applause that sounded strangely far away. "It could be missing," Principal Brooks said from the doorway. His voice was still measured, but his left hand had gone to the knot of his tie. "Old records get damaged." Ethan did not answer right away. He set Lily's soundcheck USB on the piano bench beside the damaged folder, then placed Claire's faded recorder label next to it. "Auditorium night, don't erase." Small things, ordinary things, but under the white music room light they looked heavier than trophies. Margaret pulled another binder from the lower shelf. Its spine cracked and dust caught in the seams. "No," she whispered. "There was a district arts review that year." Brooks shifted. "Margaret, this isn't the time to dig through decades of paperwork." "Then why was this file accessed 3 days ago?" She had opened the archive sign-out log. Her finger rested on a fresh blue ink entry dated that week. The room seemed to tighten around that line. Ethan leaned closer without touching it. The handwriting was careful, administrative, and the signature belonged to the current program manager. Beside the name was a reason: program history verification. Brooks took one step forward. "That could refer to anything." Ethan looked at him calmly. "Then it should be easy to explain." Brooks's mouth closed. For the first time, silence answered for him. Margaret turned the pages of the district binder until she found a photocopied sheet, yellow at the edges. Claire Walker, grade 11, had been listed as Briar Glen's selected soloist for Auditorium Night 23 years earlier. Attached to it was a grainy photograph of a teenage girl in a simple dark dress standing beside the same stage microphone Lily had tried to use. The microphone's silver grill was younger then, less dented, but the shape was unmistakable. Ethan stared at the photo as if the air had been removed from the room. Claire's smile was small, nervous, familiar. It was Lily's smile when she tried to be brave. "She never told me," he said. Margaret's eyes filled, but she did not allow the tears to fall. She stopped singing here after that night. Another sheet lay beneath the photo. The soloist had been changed 40 minutes before curtain. Reason: adjustment for donor program continuity. Ethan read the phrase twice. In the hallway, a burst of laughter came from the auditorium, bright and unaware. Inside the music room, the words on the page seemed to darken. "That's almost exactly what he said tonight," Ethan murmured. Brooks looked toward the door. "We should take this to the office after the event. Privately." "Privately is how it survived," Margaret said. It was not loud. It was worse than loud. It was true. Brooks's face tightened, not with collapse, but with calculation. "You're implying intent based on old paperwork and a child's song." Ethan turned the USB slightly so the blue light caught the lamp. "No. We're saying the paperwork, the song, the revised program, the service log, and the microphone all deserve to sit on the same table before anyone explains them away." Margaret looked at him differently then, not with pity, with respect that had not yet found words. He could have stormed back into the auditorium. He could have played Claire's recording over the speakers and let embarrassment do the work. Instead, he kept his voice low because Lily was just outside the door, sitting with her folder on her lap, trying not to hear adults say her mother's name like a broken thing. Ethan chose not revenge, but record. "I want it verified," he said, "by someone who has to sign their name to it." Brooks reached for his phone, then stopped when his eyes flicked to the small security monitor mounted above the archive desk. On it, the hallway camera showed a live view of the corridor outside the sound booth. Margaret noticed the glance. So did Ethan. A printer in the corner finished warming up and then went still, leaving the room in a thin mechanical quiet. Margaret slid the archive log, Claire's photograph, the donor adjustment sheet, and Lily's USB into a clear folder. Her hands shook once when she added the peeled recorder label. "I was a young teacher then," she said. "I told myself I couldn't change it." Ethan's face softened, but he did not rescue her from the truth. "You can change what happens now." Brooks opened the door. The applause from the auditorium rushed in, along with the smell of coffee and perfume and old velvet curtains. But the evidence folder in Margaret's hand had made the hallway feel narrower, as if the building itself understood there would be no fixing this after everyone went home. At the far end, the program manager stood near the sound booth, speaking quickly into her phone, her clipboard hugged tight against her chest. When she saw the folder, she stopped mid-sentence. And behind her, above the side door, the red camera light kept blinking. The auditorium did not grow quiet all at once. Quieted in pieces. First, the donor table stopped laughing. Then the back row stopped folding programs. Then the children in costume, lined along the side aisle with paper stars and glitter shoes, turned toward the stage because adults had begun speaking in the careful voices they used when something had gone wrong. Margaret Hayes stood beside the piano with a clear folder pressed to her chest. Ethan Walker stood near the rear sound table, one hand resting on Lily's shoulder, the other holding the small service USB that blinked blue against his palm. He did not look like a man ready to win. He looked tired. He looked like a father who would rather be anywhere else, except truth had led him back to the exact floor where his daughter had been erased. Principal Daniel Brooks stepped to the center microphone before Margaret could. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, smooth and warm, "we apologize for this brief pause. There has been some confusion about tonight's program, and I want to assure everyone that all decisions were made with the best interests of our students in mind." Valerie Crane lowered her eyes with practiced concern. The program manager stood behind Brooks, headset still on, clipboard clutched like a shield. Ethan felt Lily's fingers slip into his. "Daddy?" she whispered. "Is Mom in trouble?" The question nearly broke him. He knelt beside her, keeping his voice beneath the murmur of the crowd. "No, sweetheart. Tonight we're just letting people hear what should have been heard." Brooks continued, now turning slightly toward Ethan. "Unfortunately, one of our contracted staff members misunderstood a technical situation and allowed personal disappointment to cloud judgment." A few heads turned. Ethan did not move. That was the first moment Brooks seemed to regain the room. His version sounded clean. It had no villain, only confusion. No child cut unfairly, only scheduling. No cable pulled, only technical uncertainty. Then Margaret stepped forward. "Daniel," she said, not into the microphone yet. "If it is only confusion, then the records will show that." A school board member in a gray suit rose from the front row. "What records, Mrs. Hayes?" Margaret opened the folder slowly, as though even paper deserved reverence. First, the revised program printed at 6:41 p.m. She held it up. Lily Walker's name was removed after the official program had already been locked. Brooks gave a small nod, as if prepared. Last-minute changes are common in student events. That was the first spike of relief across the donor row. Valerie leaned back, almost smiling. Then Ethan walked forward just enough to place his service sheet on the edge of the piano. He did not take the microphone. Then the sound record should match the change. The board member took the sheet. Margaret pointed to the line Ethan had written at 6:53 p.m. Monitor feedback corrected. No disruption to main program. This shows Mr. Walker corrected a live sound issue after being accused of interfering. Brooks exhaled. That does not prove his daughter was targeted. No, Ethan said softly. It proves I was still doing the job you said I was disrupting. The room tightened again. Not against Brooks yet. Just away from certainty. The program manager stepped forward, her smile thin. The microphone issue was likely a loose connection. These old systems fail all the time. It was a reasonable explanation. For 3 seconds, it almost worked. People understood old systems, old schools, old wires, things failing at the worst moment. Then Lily, still behind Ethan's leg, lifted one small hand and pointed toward the cable box. "But Daddy taped it after rehearsal," she said. The blue tape was still there. No one laughed. No one corrected her. Ethan looked toward the stage edge, where the strip of blue painter's tape still wrapped the repaired XLR line. Margaret turned to the board member. "And the hallway camera shows who entered the sound booth after rehearsal." Brooks's head moved too quickly toward the program manager. It was small but public. The kind of glance a room feels before it understands. Valerie Crane straightened. "Surely we are not going to play security footage during a children's fundraiser." Ethan finally looked at her. Not with anger, with something steadier. "This isn't to punish a child," he said. "It's to stop adults from hiding behind one." The sentence moved through the auditorium like a low bell. Margaret nodded to the board member, who signaled the AV volunteer at the projector. The screen above the stage flickered from a fundraising slide to the school's security playback menu. Ethan stepped back beside Lily. Brooks reached for the microphone as if one more explanation could still hold the room together. But the cursor had already landed on the hallway camera file stamped 6:35 p.m., and the final piece was about to open in front of everyone. The hallway camera file opened at 6:35 p.m., and the auditorium seemed to forget how to breathe. On the screen, the program manager appeared outside the sound booth with her clipboard hugged to her chest. She looked once toward the auditorium doors, then slipped inside. 30 seconds later, Valerie Crane stepped into the frame, standing just beyond the doorway in her cream coat, her bracelet flashing under the hall light. No one spoke. The projector fan hummed. A child's paper star costume rustled somewhere near the aisle. Then the footage showed the program manager bending over the cable box, reaching toward the line Ethan had taped after rehearsal, and pulling the XLR cable free from Lily's microphone channel. Principal Brooks's hand slipped from the microphone stand. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. The program manager's face went pale beneath the stage lights. Valerie looked down at her lap as if the floor might offer her a version of events no camera had captured. Ethan did not smile. He only lowered his eyes to Lily, whose fingers had tightened around his sleeve. "Daddy," she whispered. "That was my cord." "I know," he said softly. "You didn't imagine it." Margaret Hayes stepped to the microphone then, not quickly, not triumphantly, but with the sorrow of someone who understood that truth arriving late still had to be carried carefully. "There is more," she said. On the screen, The camera footage froze beside the revised program timestamp, 6:41 p.m. Then came Ethan's service log at 6:53, the proof that he had corrected a sound issue after being blamed for creating one. Then Claire Walker's archive record appeared, yellowed and scarred by the clean blade mark where her award page had been cut away. The auditorium lights felt too bright now. Every donation envelope taped to every chair looked suddenly small. Brooks tried once to speak. "This appears to be a serious procedural failure and we will review." Margaret turned toward him, and the old music teacher's voice carried without needing force. "No, Daniel. Not procedural. Personal." She lifted Claire's faded recorder label so the front rows could see the blue handwriting. Auditorium night, don't erase. 23 years ago, Claire Walker was chosen to sing on this stage. Her performance was removed under the same language used tonight. Donor program continuity. A murmur rose, then died when Margaret nodded to Ethan. He placed the service USB into the laptop. His hands were steady, but his breathing was not. The waveform appeared first. Lily's 1-minute sound check, clean and blue. Beneath it, Ethan opened Claire's damaged recording, restored just enough for the chorus to rise through the hiss. For a moment, only the old recording played. A young woman's voice, tender and aching, filling the same auditorium that had once denied it. Then Margaret asked Lily, "Sweetheart, only if you want to." Lily looked at Ethan. He did not push her forward. He did not bend the moment into revenge. He simply held the microphone cable in one hand, the same cable that had been pulled loose, and nodded once. Lily stepped to the mic. Her first breath trembled so visibly that even the back row seemed to feel it. Then she sang the same line her mother had sung. Not perfectly, not like a trained adult, like a child carrying a song too old for her small shoulders and somehow making it lighter. Margaret faded Claire's recording in behind her, and for 4 impossible measures, mother and daughter joined across 23 years of silence. The room went still, not quiet, still. The kind of stillness where the air conditioner became thunder, where a dropped pen near the donor table sounded like a door closing, where grown people looked at the stage and realized they were not watching a talent contest anymore. They were watching something stolen being returned. Valerie Crane's bracelet stopped moving. The program manager set her clipboard down on the floor as if it had become too heavy to hold. Brooks stared at the screen, at the camera still frozen on the hand that unplugged Lily's microphone, and whatever polished sentence he had left seemed to dry in his throat. The school board member stepped onto the stage and took the microphone from its stand. "Effective immediately," he said, voice formal but shaken. "The program change is void. Lily Walker's performance is restored. The event committee's actions will be reviewed by the board, and the program manager is suspended pending investigation." A breath moved through the crowd, but no one applauded yet. They were still looking at Ethan. He stood beside the cable box, not in the light, not asking for it. His faded blue shirt wrinkled at the knees from where he had knelt for his daughter. Margaret's voice softened. "And Claire Walker's file will be restored to the school arts archive." That was when the silence broke, not into noise at first, but into tears people tried to hide. Lily stepped back and found Ethan's hand. He folded her fingers inside his, warm and careful, while the first applause began from the children in the aisle. Ethan looked at Brooks, then at Valerie, then at the crowd and spoke only once. "Don't make another child prove they deserve not to be erased." The applause grew, but Ethan did not move toward it, because justice had finally entered the room, and now he had to decide what kind of man he would be while holding it. The applause did not chase Ethan into the light. It faded slowly, row by row, as parents gathered coats, children picked glitter from their sleeves, and the school board asked the program manager to surrender her badge and clipboard before leaving the auditorium. Principal Daniel Brooks remained near the stage steps, pale under the house lights, listening as the board chair read the first decisions into the record. Lily Walker's performance restored, Claire Walker's arts file reopened, donor influence over student selection, suspended pending policy review. Valerie Crane stood with her daughter beside the donor table, no longer polished, no longer certain. Madison looked frightened, and that was when Ethan made his last choice of the night. He walked over not to Valerie, but to the child. "None of this was your fault," he said gently. "You sang because adults told you to. Don't carry what belongs to them." Madison's eyes filled, and Lily, still holding Ethan's hand, gave the smallest nod a 9-year-old could give another 9-year-old. It was not forgiveness wrapped in speeches. It was safety. It was adults finally keeping children out of adult sins. Margaret Hayes brought the clear folder to Ethan after the room had thinned. Inside lay Claire's restored archive sheet, the recorder label, the printed waveform, the service log, and a temporary board order requiring every future program change to be signed by 2 staff members and 1 board representative. "You did this clean," Margaret said. Ethan looked at the folder, then at the stage where Lily's microphone still stood. "No," he said. "The records did. I just didn't let them get buried." Margaret's face trembled, not with weakness, but with the weight of 23 years. "I should have spoken for Claire." Ethan could have agreed. He could have given her the punishment her own conscience had already carried. Instead, he looked toward Lily, who was tracing her mother's name on the photocopied page with one careful finger. "Speak for the next one," he said. That was the grace he had left room for. Later, in the lobby, the old glass trophy case was unlocked. A custodian brought out a brass nameplate tray from storage, dusty and scratched. The board chair placed a handwritten card behind the glass until a permanent plate could be made. "Claire Walker, Briar Glen Arts honoree." Lily stood before it in her blue dress, her face reflected beside her mother's name. She did not smile right away. Children understand miracles differently than adults. They do not always cheer when a wound is touched. Sometimes they just breathe easier. Ethan knelt beside her, his knees tired from the same floor where he had reconnected the cable. "She really sang here?" Lily asked. "She did," he said. "And now they'll remember." Margaret handed Lily the restored recording box, its old plastic body scuffed, its speaker still weak, its label taped back in place. "Auditorium night, don't erase." Earlier it had been a clue. Now it felt like a voice returned home. Ethan slipped the service USB into his tool bag beside his roll of electrical tape, the same bag some people had looked at as if it proved he belonged behind the scenes. But that night, the bag looked different. It was not a mark of poverty. It was a record of care. A place where broken things were carried until they could be made whole. Brooks approached before Ethan and Lily reached the exit. His apology came stiffly at first, then softer when he realized no sentence could make the night smaller. Ethan listened. He did not offer cheap forgiveness, and he did not humiliate him. "Put the policy in writing," he said. "Then teach your staff why it matters." Brooks nodded because there was nothing else honest left to do. Outside, the parking lot was cold and quiet, the kind of Midwestern night where breath turns white beneath the lamps and every sound travels farther than expected. Lily climbed into Ethan's old van and buckled herself in. For a while, neither of them spoke. Ethan started the engine, then slid Claire's recording box onto the seat between them. Static crackled. Then Claire's young voice rose softly through the little speaker, worn but no longer hidden. Lily leaned her head against the window. "Do you think Mom heard me?" Ethan watched the school's auditorium lights glowing behind them, no longer looking like a place that had taken something, but like a place learning how to give it back. "Yeah," he whispered. "I think tonight, everybody did." He drove slowly out of the lot with his daughter safe beside him, the toolbox in the back, the restored song between them, and a silence in the van that no longer felt like grief, felt like dignity finally breathing.